people can't logically say, well, the evidence proves me wrong. Instead, they discount the evidence, they distort it, they distort reality.
And they double down.
And they double down, yes, because they don't want to see themselves as bad or foolish. So they must believe that they are the good ones, they are the smart ones, and everybody else, 50-something% of the population, must be the bad and the dumb ones.
Hello and welcome to Awake at the Wheel. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the U.S. election. So I'm going to try my best to keep my political opinions to myself because I think that this outcome says more about society, about people, and it's been coming up quite often in the days leading up to and the days following the election in therapy sessions. So I think that there's a lot to talk about that goes beyond my own personal beliefs on the matter. I think that, whichever political affiliation we have, the outcome tells us that more than likely the U.S. is ready for a change, and they felt that Trump would be the representative to have that change begin and take place. As you can tell, I'm choosing my words carefully here, but I think that there's a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack here. But what's interesting, as I mentioned, is people from all ages, all demographics that I work with have been coming forward in their therapy sessions with concerns. Some of these concerns surrounding, what the future is going to look like for us here in Canada. Young people who brought forth concerns about, what is this going to look like when I get older and become an adult? Like, what rights are we going to have, and what rights are going to be taken away from us? People from older generations reflecting back on the way things were versus how they are now. But whichever way we look at it, like I said, I think that people are ready for a change. So, Oren, what are some things that you've maybe noticed the days leading up to or following as far as concerns from clients?
Well, this is fascinating because 8 years ago, first of all, nobody had any fears or concerns before the election because they all assumed Trump was going to be blown out of the water. When it happened, the vast majority of my patients were anxious. They were concerned. They didn't know what was going to happen. They were terrified. And even though they were Canadian, I have some patients who are American or have American families, and they were more concerned. But everyone thought this was the end of the world. And I really had to talk many people down from the ledge. Yeah. They truly were thinking the apocalypse is coming. Yeah. Number one. This time around, believe it or not, and it's just maybe the makeup of my patients, but most of them were actually relieved. They were happy. Now, and I have very few people, and they also say, many of them say the same thing, not all, but many. And I'm talking males and females, young and old, gay, straight. So most of them, if not almost all of them, say, I'm not a fan of Trump's at all. Okay. Like, I wish there was somebody better. Okay. But they said, seeing how, let's say, far left, radically left the country had gone, and, and Canada as well, seeing what these reckless policies have done, seeing, as you and I say often, good intentions executed poorly, leading to terrible outcomes. They said it was time for a change. So they were relieved. And some of them said, and I resonated with this, they said, now I kind of understand Trump derangement syndrome in the sense that whereas, people on the left are afraid that Trump brings with him the apocalypse, right? He's a fascist, he's Hitler, etc. That many people were saying that if Kamala had won, they were terrified of what was going to happen to the country and to the world. And, if America catches a cold, Canada sneezes. So, right. So I'm seeing a very different sentiment. Having said that, I've had a few, usually younger. And I have, let's say at least one right now, Black patient who is terrified. And she's got American family and she's American herself. And, and she's young. And I fully understand, and she's telling me, hate crimes rose from 2016 to whatever, she was giving me some stats, which I verified that there were some issues. Obviously, it wasn't a utopia at all the first 4 years. And I was trying to, help her kind of deal with this. And I'm trying to be empathetic as well, because I'm not a young Black American woman. Right. So, I'm trying to see it from her perspective. But what I kept trying to say to her was that, again, we've been through this, 8 years ago. And I said back then, we didn't know what was going to happen. And I was telling her, Trump has a team. It's not just him.
Yeah.
He's got some good advisors, unlike last time. And so I'm saying all that, but I really do see the anxiety. And again, her lived experience is very different from mine. So I'm not trying to tell her that your concerns are unwarranted. I'm just trying to help her really be able to contain the fears and anxiety so that it doesn't overwhelm her. And so she can continue on her path. And again, I've had that. The reason I'm saying her is, like I said, 8 years ago, it was almost everybody. I had the same discussion, again, without knowing what was going to happen, but trying to say, look, let's contain it. And I said to them, I've heard so many people who have knowledge of how things operate. Right. And I've heard them talk, and I've read what they've said. And, if we all knew what was, how the sausage was made, none of us would sleep at night. Okay. And I've told people it's been happening for so many years. It's happening behind the scenes, and thank goodness we're still around. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's just a quick one, but the balance is so different now. Most of my patients are relieved.
And it's so interesting because as you're saying that, I kind of arrived at the thought here that, again, especially leading up to the election, the concerns from many of my clients, I think whichever side they were on, was a fear of extremism. And what I mean by that is, the far left, good intentions executed very poorly, has resulted in ideologically possessed policies. And then I think on the right, this desire for extreme overcorrection of these policies has then resulted in extremism and some radical policies on their end of things. So I can see where the concern arises, and that's extremism when it comes to anything, I think is obviously very concerning. But similarly, when clients after the fact were coming into their sessions and quite anxious and quite worried, there were some themes throughout their thought processes in terms of catastrophic thinking and black and white thinking. So really, what I did with those clients is focus on what the source of some of those fears were. And oftentimes it didn't really have to do with the parties themselves or the candidates themselves. It had to do with, them feeling vulnerable, disenfranchised, or whatever the case may be, and worrying about how that may impact that in the future.
Right. And I mean, the irony is, if they are thinking about my future, or their future, in 4 years of a certain policies, economic, on all levels, basically, I saw the numbers. I mean, they were not good. So, so I would hope for a change. Having said that, I'm not an economist, so, I don't pretend to know more than I know. Mm-hmm. And I try not to be biased in my sources. I try to look at all sides, as much as I can. But, I understand people who have those concerns, and in 8 years ago, and I'm saying it today, and I say this all the time, and we've talked about this before, which is I say, look, global politics, those are out of your hands. And if you focus exclusively on that, you're going to feel disempowered, disenfranchised, very anxious. So I say, focus on what you can control, right? So we know prices are out of control in Canada, in the States. So I say, then you work on, you may not be able to get a higher salary, but then you think of, okay, what kind of food am I eating? Maybe I'll eat out less, how can I cut back and so on, right? So it's what can you do? It's self-advocacy. Of course, you and I always, encourage. So that's what I've been trying to do as well. Get away from the stuff out of your hands, and focus more on what can I control in my little tiny slice of the universe.
Yeah. And I don't know if personally this time around, I'm just not paying as much attention to the media, or I'm not as focused on it, but tell me if you've seen otherwise, but I'm not seeing quite the anger and the divisiveness that arose last time with the outcome with Trump winning as this time. I feel like people in general, at least what I'm seeing in the media, are more settled. Are you seeing that too?
Yeah. Let's use the word more resigned. Okay. Yeah. And just because I'm anal about language, because I do acceptance therapy as one of my 8 orientations, I always tell patients, when someone says, I've accepted this, I say, no, you haven't. Acceptance is strength. Okay. You've resigned yourself to this fate, and now you're just kind of, going into oblivion. Whereas true acceptance is different. So I don't see acceptance. I see resignation. I don't see settled. I do see, but you're absolutely right. I do not see yet, the same type of reaction that we were getting before. Mm-hmm. So, I'm thinking, okay, I think 2 things. One, what is January 20 or 6th. I think it's January 6th, but then there's a 20th. There's 6th. There's, for some reason, the 20th. I'm thinking there's also a 20th, like the 6th and the 20th. I'm not sure why, but so I'm thinking because I think 6th is when it's ratified, and then the 20th is when
they're actually in.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm thinking, are they planning for something really big then, number one? And number two, here's when my tinfoil hat comes on, seeing all of the shenanigans of, the people behind the scenes, seeing what they've tried to do, seeing what they have done. I'm wondering, are they quiet because right now they're looking at, okay, are there ways for us to somehow disrupt the process? Yeah. Are we going to try to find something that will allow us to not, ratify or, to allow Trump to become president? That's where my tinfoil hat comes on. So I'm hoping that's not the case.
And I hope not, but I think the word quiet, I think that illustrates what I was trying to get at. And I think there's a low level disappointment among some groups. So I follow some female leadership groups and just, read what some of the thoughts are surrounding that. And it's sad. And admittedly, some of this crossed my mind too. People can say, whatever they want about Kamala Harris and her campaign and so on and so forth. But I think there are some facts of the situation that she is a very accomplished professional in the work that she did. Again, people can, it's not easy to become, at the level that she did in her legal career, at least, let's say. So I think there is some disappointment there as far as, people seeing this very hardworking, accomplished woman work hard to try to accomplish the highest office in the U.S. And the comparison that's then made, I'm not saying that these are my words, but a bumbling moron comes along and says whatever he wants and isn't poised and isn't professional, and he wins anyway. So I think that there is some perception, at least among some women, that you can be the hardest working woman in the room, but it doesn't matter.
Right. And, and that's, with my 3 daughters, they will never hear that message because I don't want them to hear that disempowering message. I want them to say, if you're the hardest working, if you're the best, you are going to get that position. And so, they know my views. I don't see her as the hardest working, best, intelligent, and everything. And I've just dug deep into her career and the claims, and I've just seen that's not someone that I would want to be the first female president, of the United States. That I would be ashamed if I were a woman and that happened to be the case. So number one, hey, my fingers are crossed. I'm going to, show my political bias. I am hoping that honor goes to Tulsi Gabbard. Quite frankly, I think she would make an excellent, first female president, or just a president. I think she would have been amazing. And so my fingers are crossed that 4 years from now that she's going to run and that she will have that, that honor. So I'm sorry, but I've got nothing good to say about Kamala Harris.
I saw the look on your face when I said what I said.
I know. I'm sorry. I just no. So,
and I admittedly haven't done as much reading or digging, right? I'm taking it at face value, and there's problems with that, of course, but everyone's got some skeletons, clearly.
Yeah, well, So, I won't. I was going to go down a rabbit hole, but I'm not, because we're going to be talking more about, the broader, issues. So, yeah. So I am very hopeful. Now, I've seen some of the things that Trump has said, and by the way, years ago, I was warning my colleagues, okay, students, podcast, anybody I could speak to, where I was saying, when you go so far in one direction, be ready for the backlash. And that's what I'm afraid of. And so, I don't want to see, let's say, gender related policies that are way too far off, that are punitive. Okay. Yeah. I want to see children protected. I want to see women protected. I want to see, sanity and reality protected. But that shouldn't come at a horrible cost to the people who have gender related issues. I don't want to see that at all. And that's why I'm worried about that pendulum swing. And that's what we're seeing. Yeah. But that's humanity. And the fact that the people in these positions of power, whether it's politics, academia, science, research, medicine, whatever it was, the fact that they were so arrogant that they didn't think that backlash was going to come, because they believed we're going to keep going on this trajectory. Now, some of it was arrogance. Some of it was because they thought this was a utopia that they're creating. So they couldn't fathom that people would say, whoa, wait, there is a limit to, to what we should be doing. So I do see it as arrogance and just watching again, the people, whoever it is. And I've seen so much of this where they just can't imagine. And instead of saying maybe it's because many people woke up to what wokeness was doing, and they realized that, again, good intentions executed poorly lead to terrible outcomes. They couldn't believe that that's what caused people to vote a certain way. Instead, you hear it all over. All the pundits, so many of them are saying, wow, so racism, sexism, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, take your pick, that has to be the reason. They couldn't imagine anything else. And yet we are seeing a few people. I am hopeful that I am seeing a few pundits and politicians I'm not sure about, but pundits for sure, who are going on, who are from the left, who are saying, let's look at why this happened. Let's reflect on our values, our approaches.
Yeah.
And that makes me hopeful that if it's, people can reflect on this, learn from this.
And that's what it comes down to, I think, is that, the candidate, I don't think matters as much because, like you said, and I've said to many clients too, that there isn't one person at the top single-handedly making every single decision, right? It's a team of people. Right. It's an evaluation of the needs of the country and so on and so forth, which again is why I think Trump got elected, is because those values are shifting in another direction and people really desire change. But I fear that this is only going to create further division. So, for example, you and I clearly disagreed on the qualifications of Ms. Harris, but we can still have a conversation and smile and laugh about it, and it's fine, right? We're good. But I don't think that that's going to be the case overarchingly. And by and large, I think that it's been good wisdom to not discuss politics and religion with certain people and in certain settings. And I think that that is true, but I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. It's really sad as well, because we should be able to disagree. We should be able to converse and explore these things. But I only think it's going to get worse. And this is illustrated by, speaking of experts and pundits and so on, let's watch this video of this psychiatrist who's giving advice on how to handle these very disagreements.
When someone voted that way, do you recommend, just from a psychological standpoint, being around them? We got the holidays coming up.
So I love that you asked this question because, there is a push, I think just a societal norm that if somebody is your family, that they are entitled to your time. And I think the answer is absolutely not. So if you are going into a situation where you have family members, where you have close friends who have voted in ways that are against you, like what you said, against your livelihood, and it's completely fine to not be around those people and to tell them why.
Like, that is absolute garbage. And coming at it from, quote, the psychological perspective, like that was a total straw man argument too, by the way, because she's saying just because someone is your family doesn't mean that they're entitled to your time. Absolutely, that's true. But that has nothing necessarily to do with your political views and affiliations. We should be able to have a conversation. And for her to encourage people to cut people out is crazy. We've spoken about this in other episodes, that really should be the last resort, is cutting people out of your family and cutting people out of your life. But there can be mature boundaries that can be set around those conversations. And choosing to isolate oneself from the family, that's not a healthy solution at all. And in fact, I think it's only going to breed further extremism, because you're then going to look for people who agree with everything that you're saying, regardless of what side you're on.
Right, exactly. So there's two things there. First, we know for a fact in North America, in Canada and America, there is an epidemic of loneliness, of feeling isolated, of not having the supports. So why would you cut out the people who comprise, in theory, the most important supports that you can have? That is it's just so wrong. Number one, right? And again, and just to be clear, you and I have talked about this. If you have toxic family members, if you have harmful family members, then you're not obliged to subject yourself to, right? But that's different. Just because they voted a certain way does not de facto make them that way. Yeah. But this psychiatrist is claiming so, number one. And then number two, and you talk about the extremism. Yes, we know that, that when you have people with, mildly, not even extreme, but let's say off-center beliefs, if you have more and more of them together, we know that they push themselves further to the extremes. That's a scientific phenomenon that's been studied in social psychology. I'm blanking on the name, but I know that that's, I taught about that. So we know that that does happen. So yes. And so it's better to have people who have different views than you, keep you grounded, keep you centered, take you out of your echo chamber, help you see a reality beyond the false reality, the falsehoods, the lies, the manipulation, the deception that has been tearing our countries apart for the last number of years. I am aghast. Well, I'm not, because I'm not surprised anymore. Okay, at what we're seeing, but so-called experts, professionals, saying such things. It's just, what was she thinking? Well, I know what she was thinking.
So counter to our profession, right? That's not our job to tell people to do that first and foremost. And that's such a biased view.
Yeah, it is. And it's destructive. Okay. And it's basically, now not technically, I'm being colloquial in my words here, but that's breeding narcissism, because that's saying if people disagree with me, my perspective trumps theirs. No pun intended. Okay? I am correct, and I have the right to tell them, this is how it's going to be, versus what you and I've talked about so many times on podcasts and elsewhere, about boundary setting, right? So if someone voted differently from how you would, you wanted, you can tell them how you feel about it, okay, without being judgmental. You can say, if, for example, if you're trans and you're saying, I am concerned about what's going to happen and everything like that, and can you understand why I would be opposed to your choice? That's far better than saying you're a fascist, you're a Nazi, blah, 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 which is what's being encouraged here, right? And again, it's the most important thing is cutting those people off. It's just so wrong and wrongheaded.
And it's almost paradoxical, because I think that this, this strong political affiliation that people have is in large part bred out of a desire for belongingness. But in doing so, they're then cutting people out from the, I think, ultimate area of belongingness, which is your family. It's such a strange way to look at it.
Yes. And, but this is, you and I have talked about this, even recently, about the politicization of, let's say, our country, America, as well. And that's just leading to divisiveness. And once again, you can actually, I want to say this. I'm going to sound biased here, okay? But the divisiveness that I'm seeing, okay, and I could be biased, right? Is I see people, unless they're on the far right. Okay, I see people on the right and center being very accommodating, being very welcome, being open, and not shunning people who don't share their ideology. Yet I'm seeing so many people on the left, not far left, just the left. Okay, what we used to call liberal, now they're very illiberal. And I'm stereotyping. It's not everybody. I still have many left friends who haven't abandoned me because I'm this horrible monster, right? But I don't see that same willingness to hear this other viewpoint, to see these people who have different viewpoints as just humans versus, again, terrible people who are stealing my rights and who could ever vote for a monster like that. And again, once again, instead of being rational, logical, and saying, if it was only 2% of the population, 5%, maybe 10% of the population who voted for him, then I could see that as these are extreme, right-wing, uneducated, blah, blah, blah people, homophobic, transphobic, sexist, racist, bigoted, etc. people, right? I could see that. But when you have over 50% of the voting population, right, a majority, not just in the electoral college, but the popular vote, when you see over half, what kind of mental gymnastics do you have to do, right, to believe that they must all have these traits and agendas that you attribute to that smaller percentage? It was easier to say when it was a small group, but when it's over half, what are you saying to yourself? And the people who, instead of stepping back and go, okay, well, maybe there's something wrong with the way I'm seeing things. Maybe the media, which has been proven time and time again, have been lying to me. Maybe the fact that a lot of shenanigans have been going on behind the scenes in all levels of the department, in the government, the ones who are actually running the country, not the president, although the president is involved as well. But, that maybe I need a shift in perspective. We're not seeing that because that's how cognitive dissonance reduction works. People can't logically say, well, the evidence proves me wrong. Instead, they discount the evidence, they distort it, they distort reality.
And they double down.
Yes, because they don't want to see themselves as bad or foolish. So they must believe that they are the good ones, they are the smart ones, and everybody else, 50-something% of the population, must be the bad and the dumb ones.
Yeah, and I know I said I wasn't going to share my political affiliation, but for the sake of this statement, I will. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that I present myself as pretty centrist. But if I were to pick one side or the other, I think I lean a little bit more right because of my morals and values and faith background. So fine. But that said, I can sit back and look at both sides and understand where each are coming from. And maybe this is ignorance or laziness, or I'm not sure, but I just don't get as invested in this stuff as other people do. And I'm perplexed as to, outside of identity, what is it about this topic of politics that people are like literally willing to kill for it? Like, I don't get it.
Well, I'll say for a large percentage of people, not everybody, but a large percentage. Like, so for me, I'm keeping myself informed, right? But it's not bothering me. And again, like I said, I could understand when people were saying, like, oh my gosh, now I understand Trump derangement syndrome, because they were terrified of 4 more years of Kamala. I was very worried. I truly was, but I contained it. And I was prepared that if she won, okay, all right, let's see what's going to happen. And, and again, I was prepared to do everything I told my patients. Okay. So, my interest, I try to keep myself informed. I want to be a critical thinker. I don't want to be a hypocrite. So, the reason that I don't think it exercises you so much is that, and here's where people are not going to like it. Okay, I'm not saying everybody, okay, but I think a large percentage of people who do get so worked up over this is that, and again, it's going to sound very dismissive, so I'm not saying everybody. I want to be very clear on this. If this is you, I'm not saying this is necessarily your motives, but it is for many people. They don't have anything else that is fulfilling for them. Yeah. They don't, right? It just feels like that what am I doing on this planet? What am I doing here? And so on. So, some of them just buy into the ideology, the oppressed ideology that has now, just permeated society. And so that, if I'm not doing well, that's because I belong to some oppressed, category. Right. Because, the people who do well, and this is not hyperbole. And if someone says, oh, you're just oversimplifying it. No, this is the actual, principles that are underlying so much of what we're seeing, whether it's wokeism, I'm not going to label all the different movements, sure, but virtually all the major movements today go under the principle of, if you're successful, you're the oppressor. If you're not successful, you're the oppressed, right? So if you feel that way, you feel so disempowered, so disenfranchised, but it's a human condition to want to aspire to something greater than ourselves. So they get worked up because they want to be part of something great. Okay. Whether it's the right side or the left. And I think that's why so many people get so worked up. And if you have, and by the way, we know this because people who live in places where survival is on the menu every day, right? Just trying to feed yourself is on the menu every day. They don't care about this stuff, right? They care about survival. So, this is a luxury belief for many people, just because we happen to live in such, we're so lucky, relatively speaking. We live in some of the greatest places in the world, right? As bad as it is here, as bad as it could be here, it's nothing compared to so much of the rest of the world.
Worse elsewhere. Yeah,
exactly. So I think that's why people, they just need to feel that they're part of something, that they're doing something, that they have some meaning in their existence.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I think, certainly doesn't apply to everybody, but I think at least with the clients that I've worked with, what it has typically boiled down to is them not feeling in control of certain aspects of their life and feeling like now somebody else is going to be making those decisions for them. So I think that does tie right into what you said.
Yeah. And again, and by the way, Little side note, but I am really hoping that the people who are, who are on the winning side, that they be gracious in victory and that they do what I have seen done, which is, once again, be accommodating and say, hey, look, you know what? Here's where, the olive branch is here. Even if I'm in the victor's position, I'm extending this olive branch because being divisive has not helped anybody. It's only hurt us. And on every level you can imagine, like internally and interpersonally and socially, we know it's just destroying the fabric of what we used to know as Canada and the United States. So I'm really hoping that people will be, just gracious. Don't gloat, right? Don't punish. Don't say, I told you so. Just say, hey, I'm still here.
And I'm optimistic and hopeful that people will just kind of drop this divisiveness, but I'm also pessimistic that it's probably going to get worse. Social media is not doing any favors, I don't think. And,
Right.
Just enhancing that echo chamber even further. So, not really making much of a point here, but while I am optimistic, I do fear that it's only going to get worse.
I really hope it doesn't. I don't know what to say. That's maybe faith. Maybe I have faith in that. And I hope it's not blind faith. I will say, if anyone watching this wants to contribute to it getting better, just do what we've talked about all the time, which is just at least you don't have to agree with, you don't have to like, but understand the other person's perspective or the other side's perspective. Just understand it. And again, you don't have to join it because I disagree with so much of what I'm seeing on the left, right? Even though I come from the left, right? I am historically and everything, my family, everything, we are left. We really are. Yeah. But sorry, that we used to be, what we call liberal. When the left was liberal, right?
Yes.
We are classically liberal. So,
likewise,
right. So I disagree with what I've seen, but I understand it. And that's why I can have actual true compassion, right? Rather than false compassion. And I hope more people will do that. And I'll tell you right now, I mean, again, it's sadly cognitive dissonance reduction basically prevents this from happening for most people. But more and more people, there are some people, either A, things get so extreme, which is what happened with so many people, that they're able to go, whoa, I just didn't see this coming, or I didn't know it was happening. I heard sort of, and okay, but then you see it with their own eyes. It happened to someone, directly that they know, or to themselves, right? So that's one way. Or I was going to say there's another way. Oh yes, with the opening up your eyes, okay? And I'm telling everyone, if you can find just one person, just one, where you're not trying to ram something down their throat, but try to show them a couple of examples, just a few examples of where they were lied to. For example, I can believe this because I think Obama has proven himself to be someone of questionable character. But last week alone, 4 years after the fact, 7 years, when I say 4, 7 years after the fact, 7 years and like 3 months after the fact, okay, he still spread that lie that Trump said there were fine people on both sides and meant it to refer to the Nazis or the white supremacists. 7 years, even when Snopes has had to debunk that statement, right? He still said that. Biden was saying that up until his brain kind of stopped functioning, but Biden said that as well, even up until a few months ago. So for Obama to say that, so if you can show people, and by the way, I have, and some people, they say, oh my goodness, I had no idea. And I say, yeah, you don't have to like Trump. I still don't like Trump. I do not like that person as a human being, but I don't like also being lied to, right? And so that was my awakening moment. I can't remember if it was, just so you know, for me, because just so you know, when Trump and Hillary Clinton, were first going at it, just because I had such a distaste for Trump, I wanted Clinton to win. Mm-hmm. Okay, but then and my distaste for Trump came not just it's from a long time ago. I never liked him just because he's such a braggart, and et cetera, et cetera. He's not diagnosing, but everybody would agree, I think, that he's a narcissist. Again, I'm not diagnosing. Got to be clear. But I didn't like all of that, right? Mm-hmm. And then so I saw him acting certain ways and being buffoonish and everything and having the media ramp it up. At that one time where I saw, to me, when I saw him dumping a bunch of food into a goldfish pond, and I'm, having a Japanese wife, having lived in Japan, I thought that how what's the right word, disrespectful. Here he is with the prime minister, and there's a beautiful koi in this beautiful place and everything. He just dumps this box, right? And the media showed that. And then I say, oh, wait a second. He was just following the prime minister of Japan who did the same thing moments before. I think that was my aha moment. That might have been. Okay?
There's where context matters, right?
Context matters, right? And I was just, I allowed my bias, to blind me to other possible, explanations. And I thought it was so prevalent. It was, like everyone was saying the same thing. Every media source, all the people around him, everyone, and I'd heard all the stories about his business practices and how he had, ripped off so many people as a businessman, which I'm sure are still true. Okay. Just because I've heard so many of these. But again, so I just allowed myself to kind of be caught up in that. And then when I had that moment, and again, it might have been that one, it might have been something before. I can't quite remember, but it was, it might have been shortly before that. I'm not quite sure. Okay, but again, it was just seeing more and more, and then my perspective changed. I started looking more for disconfirming evidence, which I used to do anyway. But I thought, you can always improve. Yeah. I thought I was doing it 100%. Maybe it was only 70% that I was doing that, or, and so that's what I'm saying. If people can just find one or two examples where they say, wow, I really thought this was true. Okay. Whether it's about Trump or anything else. Okay. Same with about, let's say trans people. Okay. If people think, well, they're all just these men parading as women because they're perverts, blah, blah, blah. Listen to some stories of people who felt a certain way all the time, and everything like that. Hear that, have some compassion, have an open mind and go, oh, wait. Maybe they're not all these people that I thought that they were. Maybe there are truly young people with gender dysphoria or, an incongruence and so on. So, again, and you can still hold your beliefs and you can still say, yes, surgeries for children are wrong and hormone treatments are wrong, et cetera. You can still hold that, but you can still say, but these are real people. Yeah. Right. They shouldn't be pawns. And let's have some compassion for these real people who are suffering. So I'm just throwing a few different things out there, but that's how you make change a little bit at a time. And most importantly, it's just like, well, usually it's with like having a real connection with a real person, like again, seeing real examples or, again, hearing of real examples of people who are hurt by certain policies, whether they're woke policies or they're anti-woke policies. That's what I'm hoping. That, that if everyone knows one person or two people that they can try to do that with, you might have 20 people in your circle, maybe one or two will be open to that. Yeah. So don't try to bludgeon them over the head. Don't be, arrogant while you're doing it. Just come with an olive branch. And again, from whatever side you're on and just try to have a good engagement. Maybe slightly you can make some change.
And interestingly, so I think these are really good kind of external things that people can explore and reflect on. And it aligns very well with the recommendations that I've been making to clients about internally what they can do. Interestingly, I've been suggesting that people lean into the discomfort. So 2 ways. One being have a conversation with somebody who disagrees with you, but listen to understand, not to argue, not to prove your point, and not to change your mind necessarily either, right? If you do change your mind, that's great, but listen to understand, listen to see where other people are coming from and recognizing that is going to be uncomfortable, but that's how we grow and that's how we think critically is by getting as much information on a topic as we can. And then secondly, focusing on, what is it about the other side that is making me uncomfortable? What are the biases that could be contributing to this discomfort? And is that something that I can work on growing from? So really, rather than running away from the discomfort, I think it's really important to examine that discomfort.
I think that's excellent for sure. Right. And entering this, and people laugh when I say this, but from a position of humility. Mm-hmm. Right. Again, I think that's so important. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I don't know whether it's facts or whether it's someone's experiences. And I think the leaning into it, I think it's really, really important. Not running away from it. And because it's very easy to run away. You just go back to your echo chamber and you just say, all those other people are lunatics or monsters or right. It's not helpful. And we grow, whether it's as an individual or as a society. So yes, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. So to our listeners, I'm curious whether you're Canadian or American or from anywhere else in the world. I know that this is a topic of conversation that's popping up all over the place. So what have your experiences been? Are you able to have discussions or is it being shut down? Let us know in the comments.
Right. And I would say that with, the holiday season approaching, right, that this is something that I think it behooves everybody to do what you just said, to reflect on what's going on inside of themselves so that they don't feel that, this holiday season is going to be, where can I visit? Right? Are you striking off all these people, especially one's family? I hope, and by the way, if it is as simple as saying, you know what, we're here for a good time. We're here for family. Let's leave politics out of the mix. Then all the power to you, if that's what it takes. Okay. Let's not make this, it's stressful enough. The holiday season is stressful enough. Let's not add to the stress. So.
Absolutely.
So on that note, until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel.